What people ate when cities were under siege, dark food history. A city can look powerful from the outside. Stone walls, tall gates, watchtowers, markets, church bells, palaces, crowded streets. But close the gates long enough and every city becomes a stomach. A stomach with thousands of mouths. A stomach that cannot feed itself. Because cities do not grow enough food inside their walls. They survive on roads, rivers, markets, ships, caravans, farmers outside the gates. Break those supply lines and the city begins to eat itself. First the grain stores empty, then the animals disappear. Then the gardens are stripped, then horses become meat, dogs become meat, rats become valuable, leather is boiled, wallpaper paste is scraped, bones are crushed, and hunger turns the strongest fortress into a prison. This is the dark history of what people ate when cities were under siege. Part 1. The city as a trap. A siege is one of the oldest forms of warfare. If an army cannot break a city by force, it can wait. Waiting becomes a weapon. The attacking army surrounds the walls. Roads are blocked. Wells may be cut off. Fields outside the city are burned. Food convoys are captured. Markets stop moving. The city remains standing. But inside, time begins to attack. At first, people may feel confident. The walls are strong. The soldiers are ready. The storehouses are full enough. The leaders give speeches. The priests pray. The citizens tell each other that help will arrive. But food is mathematics. If a city has a certain amount of grain and a certain number of mouths, every day has a cost. Every soldier eats. Every child eats. Every horse eats. Every prisoner eats. Every old person, sick person, worker, and guard eats. The city may survive 1 week, then 1 month, then winter. But the numbers do not care about courage. A siege transforms politics into calories. And once the food begins to fail, the wall that protected the city becomes the wall that traps it. Part 2. Rationing the impossible. The first food of a siege is normal food under control. Grain is counted. Bread is weighed. Wine, oil, dried beans, salted meat, and stored fish are inspected. Authorities may seize private supplies. Markets may be regulated. Prices may be fixed. Rations may be distributed. At this stage, people still eat recognizable meals, but those meals shrink. Bread becomes smaller. Soup becomes thinner. Meat is saved for soldiers. Animals are slaughtered carefully. The wealthy may still hide supplies. The poor begin suffering first. Rationing is supposed to create fairness, but hunger always tests fairness. Who gets more food? The soldier on the wall? The child? The pregnant woman? The official? The person with money? The person with connections? In every siege, food becomes a moral argument. A loaf is no longer just a loaf. It is loyalty, discipline, class, power. A ration card can become more valuable than jewelry. A sack of grain can become a political threat. A rumor about hidden food can cause panic, because in a besieged city, everyone is watching everyone else eat. Part 3. The animals disappear. When grain runs low, the animals vanish next. At first, livestock are slaughtered. Cattle, sheep, goats, pigs, chickens. These are expected foods. Hard choices, but not shocking. Then the city turns to animals that were not meant for the table. Horses are among the first. In normal times, a horse is transport, labor, speed, status, and military power. In siege time, a horse becomes meat. This is more than a culinary change. It is a sign that the future is being eaten. A city that eats its horses loses movement. It loses cavalry. It loses carts. It loses power after the siege ends. But hunger narrows time. Tomorrow matters less than tonight. After horses, people may eat dogs and cats. Animals that once slept near the hearth become protein. This is one of the emotional breaking points of siege famine. A family may begin with grief, then necessity, then numbness. The animals disappear from the streets. No barking, no stable sounds, no market animals. The city becomes quieter. And that silence tells everyone the same thing. The siege is working. Part 4. Rats, birds, and the new menu. Once respectable meat disappears, hunger lowers the boundary again. Rats become valuable. Mice become food. Birds are trapped. Pigeons vanish from squares. Stray animals are hunted. Insects may be eaten. Anything that moves is examined differently. A rat in peacetime is filth. A rat in siege time is calories. This transformation is one of the most disturbing truths of hunger. Famine does not only change what is available. It changes disgust. Disgust is easier to maintain when the stomach is full. When starvation advances, the mind renegotiates. The first time, a person may gag. The second time, they may apologize to themselves. The third time, they may simply cook. This does not mean people became less human. It means hunger was attacking one of the human mind's protective walls. The boundary between clean and unclean, between pet and meat, between vermin and dinner. Under siege, every category becomes unstable. And the city learns a new menu written by desperation. Part 5. Leather, glue, and the dream of nutrition. When living animals are gone, people turn to the remains of animals. Leather belts, shoes, harnesses, book bindings, saddles, glue, gelatinous scraps, bones. These are not good foods. Some provide little useful nutrition. Some are difficult to digest. Some may be contaminated by tanning chemicals or dirt. But siege hunger often follows the logic of extraction. If something came from an animal, perhaps something in it can still keep a body alive. Leather can be soaked, scraped, boiled for hours, chewed, swallowed. The result is not a meal in any normal sense. It is a physical argument against death. Bones can be boiled again and again. A thin broth may emerge. The flavor may be faint. The nourishment may be small. But the warmth matters. The ritual matters. A pot over a fire tells the family that life is still being defended, even when the pot contains almost nothing. The tragedy of leather and bone food is that it often appears at the edge. By the time people are boiling belts, the city has already lost its animals, its reserves, and much of its hope. Part 6. The Siege Kitchen. The kitchen of a besieged city is different from an ordinary kitchen. There is less firewood, less water, less salt, less fat, less patience. Cooking becomes a series of compromises. How long can we boil this without wasting fuel? Can we soften it enough to swallow? Can we mix it with something else? Can we make one portion look like three? A siege recipe is not written for taste. It is written for survival. A handful of grain becomes thin porridge. A bone becomes broth. A scrap of meat becomes flavor for an entire pot. A piece of stale bread is soaked until it swells. People learn to eat slowly, to save crumbs, to scrape bowls, to drink cooking water, to chew what they once threw away. A city under siege becomes a giant school of scarcity. Everyone learns. Children learn the weight of a ration. Adults learn how to lie about hunger. Old people learn when to give away their portion. And cooks learn that the difference between a meal and a memory can be one spoon of fat. Part 7. The Market of Desperation. Even in siege, markets can continue, but they become strange and cruel. A rat may cost more than a chicken once did. A small bag of flour may cost a fortune. Jewelry is traded for grain. Furniture for bread. Tools for a handful of beans. Books for fuel. Family heirlooms for something edible. The economy changes from money to survival value. Gold is useless if no one will sell food for it. A loaf may be worth more than a painting. A potato may be worth more than a ring. A hidden sack of grain can make a person rich and hated. Siege markets reveal the skeleton of value. When hunger is absolute, beauty loses power. Status loses power. Symbols lose power. Food becomes the center of reality. This is why sieges can destroy social order without destroying walls. People begin to ask who is hoarding, who is profiting, who is eating better, who is lying. Hunger turns private meals into public suspicion. The city may still fly its flag, but inside trust begins to starve. Part 8. Children of the Walls. Children experience siege food differently. Adults remember normal meals. Children may begin to forget them. A child born during a siege may know ration bread before soft bread, thin soup before milk, fear before appetite. Children may be taught not to ask for more, not to cry when the bowl is empty, not to waste a crumb, not to mention the animals that are gone. A siege changes children's senses. The smell of boiling leather, the taste of watery grain, the sound of ration lines, the cold of kitchens without enough fuel, the silence at the table when adults divide food. These memories can last longer than the siege itself. A city may rebuild its walls. Markets may return. Bread may become ordinary again. But survivors remember. They remember the day the horses disappeared, the first time they ate something forbidden, the exact size of the ration, the shame of hunger, the pride of enduring. This is why siege food belongs not only to military history, it belongs to family history, to memory, to the body. Part 9. When help does not arrive. Every besieged city waits for rescue. An army beyond the hills, a fleet beyond the harbor, a road reopened, a treaty signed, a miracle. Hope becomes a food of its own. People ration hope the way they ration bread. Maybe next week, maybe tomorrow, maybe tonight. But when help does not arrive, the city descends. Rations shrink. Disease spreads. Bodies weaken. Labor becomes difficult. Defending the walls becomes harder. The attackers may not need to storm anything. They only need to wait while hunger does the work. This is the brutality of siege warfare. It turns civilians into targets without always touching them directly. The weapon is not only the sword or cannon. The weapon is the empty pot, the blocked road, the closed gate, the missing harvest, the child asking for bread that no longer exists. Part 10. The City After Hunger. When a siege ends, the city does not instantly recover. Food may return, but bodies cannot heal in one day. Streets may reopen, but animals are gone. Tools have been sold. Houses have been burned for fuel. Families are smaller. The social order is damaged, and food itself has changed meaning. People may celebrate real bread, real meat, fresh vegetables, milk, salt. A normal meal becomes almost sacred, but the memory remains. Because siege teaches a terrifying lesson. Civilization depends on movement, on roads, on trust, on farms beyond the city, on people we may never meet. A city is not self-sufficient because it has walls. It is alive because food flows into it. Stop that flow and the city begins to transform. The market becomes a ration line. The stable becomes a butcher shop. The pet becomes meat. The belt becomes broth. The wall becomes a cage. And the people inside learn what hunger can make possible. So when we look at ancient walls, medieval towers, or ruined fortresses, we should not only imagine battles. We should imagine kitchens, empty shelves, hidden grain, thin soup, a mother dividing the last piece, a child listening for rescue, a city waiting while its food disappears. Part 11. Hunger as a weapon. A siege reveals one of the coldest truths in military history. Hunger can be used deliberately, not as an accident, not as a side effect, as a strategy. An attacking army may not need to defeat every defender in combat. It can break the civilian population first. It can make children cry for bread. It can make parents pressure leaders to surrender. It can turn disease, cold, and exhaustion into allies. This is why siege food belongs to the moral history of war. The people who suffer most are not always the people who chose the conflict. A baker inside the city did not declare war. A grandmother standing in a ration line did not design the fortifications. A child eating boiled leather did not command the army. Yet their stomachs become the battlefield. When food is blocked, the weapon enters the kitchen. The pot becomes part of the war. The empty shelf becomes part of the war. The market price becomes part of the war. And every meal tells the civilian population how close they are to collapse. Part 12. The rituals that kept people human. Even in the worst sieges, people tried to preserve rituals. They still divided meals, still waited for everyone to sit, still saved a portion for someone absent, still called thin liquid soup, still called rough scraps dinner. These rituals mattered because siege hunger tried to reduce people to bodies. A body needs calories, but a human being needs meaning. A mother who serves a tiny ration in a bowl instead of handing it out like animal feed is protecting dignity. A family that eats together, even in silence, is defending the shape of home. A cook who flavors water with the last onion skin is refusing to let hunger define everything. This does not make the suffering less real. It makes the endurance more human. Siege food is often remembered for horror. Rats, horses, leather. But it should also be remembered for the quiet acts of care that survived inside the horror. The shared crumb, the saved spoonful, the lie that an adult was not hungry, the warm bowl given to a child first. In those moments, food was no longer only survival. It was love trying to remain visible under starvation. Part 13. Cooking under fire. Cooking during a siege was not guaranteed. A family might have food but no fuel, grain but no clean water, a pot but no safe place to make fire. Bombardment, arrows, cannon fire, raids, and collapsing buildings could turn the simple act of cooking into danger. Smoke from a fire might reveal a position. A trip to a well might expose a person to attack. A ration line might become a target. Food had to be prepared in broken conditions. Half-cooked grain, cold meals, shared fires, communal ovens, burned scraps, unwashed pots. The siege kitchen was a place where domestic life collided with war. The same hands that once kneaded bread in peace now measured crumbs under threat. The same hearth that once warmed a family might sit cold because wood was gone. This is one reason siege hunger was so devastating. It did not only reduce ingredients, it attacked the entire system that turns ingredients into meals. Food is not food until people can prepare it safely. War steals even that. Part 14. The morning after the gates open. When the gates finally opened, the first meals after a siege could be dangerous in another way. Starving bodies cannot always handle sudden abundance. A person who has survived on thin rations may become ill if they eat too quickly. Relief must be managed. Bread must be distributed. Soup must be prepared. The weakest must be fed carefully. But emotionally, the return of food could feel overwhelming. The smell of real bread, the sight of vegetables, the weight of meat, the sound of animals again. A marketplace reopening after siege was not just commerce, it was resurrection. Yet even then, the city was not the same. People remembered who shared and who hoarded, who profited and who gave, who survived and who did not. The foods of siege could disappear from the table, but not from memory. Long after the walls were repaired, survivors might still save crumbs, still distrust empty shelves, still fear closed roads, still look at a horse, a dog, a rat, or a leather belt, and remember the moment when the city asked whether it could be eaten. This was the dark history of what people ate when cities were under siege.